Good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen, friends, family. Welcome to the Gordon Current Science and Technology stage, and welcome to the Health Fair. This is our final talk of our two-day event that we have each and every year. This year's theme, BrainWorks. We're talking about the brain, obviously, and technology, how we use technology to study the brain and how brain can influence and be influenced by that technology. So we have for our last talk of the day, Dr. Rhoda Au from Boston University will be talking about our brain in the digital age. Let's please join me in welcoming Dr. Au to the stage.
So thank you very much, and thank you for taking time out of this great museum to come over and listen with me. And I would like to tell you a little bit about some of the work we're doing related to the brain at BU, at Boston University. So just to start with, you might notice there's some pictures, hopefully, of some people that you recognize, some very famous people in history, both in science and then some who are contemporary, people that you should know today. And what do they all have in common? They've all done all the great things that they've done during their lives, they did through their brain. And it turns out that there's a lot of amazing things that we do every day with our brain. And that's what we're really trying to understand, is how are we able to do that? So to start with, I just wanted to give you a little picture about what your brain actually looks like. So this is actually a fresh brain. Okay, and this is the side view of a fresh brain. So this is what your brain looks like right now in your head. And this is actually an upside down view of that brain. Okay? So, but when we study the brain, we actually also put it in preservatives. Because when so these are people, we get brains at Boston University from people who have dedicated their lives, they really want to enable research, and they have given us their brains. And we value that contribution that they give, and we want to make sure that we do the best we can in science to use that contribution. So one of the things we do is we preserve these brains, and we preserve them in chemicals so that years later we can still study them. So what you see up here now is a preserved brain, okay? And this is a healthy preserved brain. But we also get brains that aren't healthy. And what you're seeing here is a brain that has disease, okay? Now notice in that top brain, it's kind of sliced because we need to cut up that brain and able to look inside. And so what you see here is a slice of that brain. And this, again, is a healthy slice of brain, okay? This is what your brain looks like when it's healthy. But, again, you can see very clearly here, this brain, the second brain, looks a lot different. And this is because this is a brain with disease. And that's what we're interested. We're interested in the differences between healthy brain and brains with different diseases. So what I'm showing you here now are how we look at the brain when we look at it under a microscope. Because for us to really understand what these diseases of the brain are, we actually have to go down and we have to look in. And we have to do that microscopically. So what we do is we take those brains, we put them in chemicals, and then those chemicals are actually, they have certain things where they will stain different parts of the brain and then allow us to look for those signs of disease. And so what you see here on the top panel is the microscopic view of the brain of someone who's pretty healthy. It's an elderly person, and if you look across, their brain looks pretty clear. Now, in the second panel underneath, you're actually looking at the brain of someone who has Alzheimer's disease, and these are from different brains of Alzheimer's disease. So Alzheimer's disease is generally considered a disease where you have a lot of problems with your memory. Okay, that's what people most think about when they hear Alzheimer's disease. And as you look across, what you're seeing are people who have a little bit of Alzheimer's in their brain, so they're having some problems, all the way into people who have very severe stages of Alzheimer's disease. And that would be at a level where you may actually even forget the names of the people around you and your loved ones, okay? But the Alzheimer's disease is not the only diseases of the brain. So another common disease is actually Parkinson's disease. So there are, a number of famous people that you might recognize that have Parkinson's disease. And in this case, this is called, this particular type of disease has these things called Lewy bodies. And they're in this area of the brain called the substantia nigra. And this is actually how we know when someone has Parkinson's disease, right? Then most recently, you might have heard in the news a lot about how professional football players, when we look at their brains, we actually see that there are pathologies in their brain that are actually very similar to what we see in Alzheimer's brains. The distribution is different, the quality of it's a little bit different, but they're the same kinds of what we call neurofibrillary tangles that are in these brains. And so this is actually work that you might have heard about through, there was a movie recently called Concussion that really highlighted, the work of Dr. Amolo. And then my own colleague, Anne McKee at Boston University, has done a lot more work around these brains, particularly around NFL players. And you might have actually also heard about her work. And we call this chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. Okay. So my own work is actually, I'm a neuropsychologist. And so I'm really interested in how does the brain work. I want to understand it from healthy all the way to disease. And I want to understand it across different conditions. And that's what I'm actually going to talk to you for the rest of the time today. And I want to talk to you also about how I've been able to use technology to actually change the way in which I'm able to study the brain. Okay? So first, I want to talk about our digital voice work. So as a neuropsychologist, what I like to do is I like to give you tests and to find out, how do you think? How does your memory work? How do your visual spatial functions work? How do your executive functioning work? And so one of the things I've been doing at my laboratory, which is at the Framingham Heart Study, is I've been giving these tests to people, and I've been recording them. I've been digitally recording them at the same time. And so consequently, I now have captured what their responses are with digital technology. And what that has allowed me to do is it allowed me to look at their responses across many different dimensions. So think about this. So how many of you have actually talked into your phone, right? How many of you have actually used things like Siri, right? All right? So that's using voice analysis software, and we're using that same kind of software to now look at these digital voice recordings, okay? So I'm going to give you an example of what we do. So I'm going to test you just very quickly, all right? I'm going to ask you some questions. How are an orange and a banana alike? Can someone tell me? They're fruit, right? All right. Now, how about an axe and a saw? How are they alike? Tools, that's right. How about north and west? Directions. Great. I think your brains are all good. All right? So now what I want to do is I want to give you an example of someone answering those same questions who has a little bit of dementia. All right? All right. Now, so did you hear sort of a little bit of difference? You can see some hesitation. You can see a little bit of what we call a little bit of word finding problems, right? Okay, so these are the kinds of things that we can now pick up in the digital voice to measure in much more precise ways. Now I'm going to give you an example of someone who has moderate dementia, okay? So their brain is further along in the disease process.
And how are they alike?
Oh, they come the same.
And how are north and west alike?
Well, north and west was cold.
And how are they alike, north and west?
West is down south, and north is cold anywhere. So that's how I can figure it out.
Okay.
So I assume you could hear the difference, right? If nothing else, sort of the length in which they were speaking. So now we're able to actually measure with the digital technology all the components related to these different responses. So now I'm going to go on and give you another example of what we're doing. So this is what you're watching right now is another neuropsychological test. We call it the TRAILS-B. And usually this is a paper and pencil test, and what we've done is we've substituted a regular pen with a digital pen, okay? And what you're watching right now, and you can see in the colors at the bottom, we're actually tracking velocity differences as they're going from one spot to the other, okay? So this is yet another example in which we're using digital technology to basically give us a window into the brain as it's actually doing this test, and we're able to measure all these components as they're doing it, okay? So what I did was I actually brought you one of these pens. So this is an off-the-shelf digital device. And there's actually, and I'll pass this around if you want to see it, there's a camera that's embedded in here, okay, in this pen. And that's how we're picking up people's performance. We actually have them drawing on this paper. Now you'll notice on this paper it looks a little bit gray, doesn't it? Right? Well, that's actually because these are very small dots on this paper. And this pen is actually picking up as it moves across the page between these different dots. And that's how we're picking up this information. So if you'd like to see this pen afterwards, I have it up here for you to see, but this is just using off-the-shelf technology, right? So now what you're watching is this is sort of a new development for us. So this is a platform that we've developed in order to capture any cognitive tests that I give. And I usually give them on paper and pencil, but I want to get it digitally as well. So this is a platform that I've developed with my colleagues in China at Tsinghua University at Peking Union Medical College. And one of the things we did was we decided to experiment with a different type of a pen, okay? So this is actually the pen itself. Okay, and it uses a different kind of technology. So it uses Bluetooth technology to actually track a person's hand as it's holding the pen at all times. And this is why, and why is that important? I'll show you why. So now, what you're watching in red is someone who's holding this pen and moving it in the air, okay? So everything that's red is tracking how they're moving their hand with the pen in order to do this test. Once the pen hits the paper, then you will see it turn black, okay? And what this new pen that we're experimenting with allows us now to do is we can track performance both on the paper and off the paper. And so we can watch as they move from one part of the test to the next part of the test and really, again, better understand what they're doing and thinking as they're doing it, okay? All right. So that was sort of to give you an overview of the work that I've been doing specifically around cognitive testing to get at how does your brain actually work. But in addition, we're also interested in the things that influence your brain's ability to work. And so we've sort of extended our use of digital technologies to think about all the other behaviors and health metrics that we know are supposed to impact your brain. And that's what I'm going to review for you today. And I'm doing this in collaboration with some of my other colleagues at the Framingham Heart Study. So first, I always say that sleep is the under-recognized risk factor for brain health, okay? I don't know that we always appreciate how important sleep is for our brain health, but at Framingham, we actually have started to study sleep through wearable devices. We mail this device to participants. They wear it on their chest, they have an oximeter on their finger, and they wear it for 2 nights, and then they mail it back. And from that, we're able to gather information about the quality of their sleep. So the top graphs on the 2 sets of slides here are images of good quality sleep. People who've basically gone to sleep, slept through the whole night, and got a really solid good night of sleep. The other 2 actually represent sleep patterns that are disrupted, okay? Then in addition, we're interested in, we all know sort of body mass index has a real impact on your health, physical health, as well as brain health. And now what we're having our participants use is a digital scale. And the digital scale will actually break down weight in terms of your body mass, your bone mass, your water mass, etc. It will also, this scale will actually also track your heartbeat and your heart rate. And then this pulse wave at velocity is actually how fast are those waves in your heart rate, okay? So blood pressure has been associated with all sorts of health-related issues, certainly heart disease and stroke, but it turns out that it's also related to brain health. And so now we're able to continuously measure your blood pressure. Because I'm going to guess, how many of you go to the doctors and get your blood pressure measured? Right? But how often do you do that? Once a year? Maybe, right? Well, it turns out we know blood pressure fluctuates, right? It fluctuates throughout the day. But we actually don't know how much it fluctuates. And this technology is going to allow us to understand that. And I think when we understand better how our blood pressure changes throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month, throughout the year, it will better make us understand how that's then impacting the brain. The other thing that we have found associated with brain is gait. How you walk, your stance, how fast you move, what your balance is. And so we've been able now to bring in digital technology in order to measure those in much greater detail than we have been able to before. Okay. And then finally, I'm sure a lot of you recognize sort of the iWatch, right? And so we are actually bringing this into the Framingham Heart Study to use the iWatch in order to allow us to gather measures of physical activity. There's no question physical fitness, physical activity is associated with heart health as well as brain health. And so our participants are actually going to wear this on a continuous basis so that we can also measure their physical capabilities. And finally, because we are the heart study, we're very interested in sort of other metrics of heart health, and this is looking really at sort of your heart activity over time on a continuous basis. There's something called atrial fibrillation that I think some of you probably know about, right? And that's about the fluttering of your heart, and being able to detect that is very important because those are risk factors for both heart attack and stroke. Okay, and it turns out that it's actually also related, we think, to Alzheimer's disease and dementia. And then finally, one of the things that I've been very concerned about is this idea that we keep measuring all sorts of health metrics, all sorts of performance at one moment in time. So earlier I showed you all the work we're doing on cognitive testing. Well, that requires someone to come in, take a test over usually about an hour period, and then they go home. Well, I can tell you, there are all sorts of things that affect someone's performance when they show up to see me, right? They might be tired. They might have, when they were driving here, because they're in Boston, they might have hit some traffic along the way. Maybe they, which makes them not in the greatest of moods. They might have just had an argument with someone. There's lots of reasons why they may not be performing at their optimal level. And I'm concerned about that because I'm trying to make a lot of inferences on the basis of their performance coming in that one time. So this technology is actually, it's the first FDA-cleared smartphone application for measuring cognitive behaviors. And we're going to be testing that at Framingham and allowing people to then use this in their home so that maybe I can now track cognitive behaviors much more effectively in real time in a natural setting, right? And I'm going to get a better sense of what their cognition as a result of that. So what's the reason we do all this, right? Well, one of the key reasons is we want to help the pharmaceutical companies go out there and find much more effective medications to help treat brain diseases. I'm sure you're aware Alzheimer's disease right now is not a curable disease with any known medications, and we really want to help facilitate and find that cure, okay? But the other thing that we really want to do is we want to preserve brain health overall. The real ultimate goal is to have you not get these diseases in the first place. Okay. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer some questions.